Hi everyone, this is Piyush Ranjan. I am the founder of Management Masters. We are a boutique admissions consulting firm for the top MBA programs around the world. And thank you so much for joining us for this exclusive detailed session on and how you can work upon those things to be able to ace ISB application this year. Right. Now, a very quick brief background about myself. I started Management Masters around in 2019, almost 4 years ago. And since then, we have been working with multiple different candidates around the world, helping them get into top MBA programs. We focus exclusively on the top MBA programs, and ISB in India is the only school that we usually help with. Uh, at the same time, we have had tremendous success rate with ISB. So last year, we had almost 23 candidates who applied with us to the ISB program. And out of those 23, 19 people received an interview call. Out of those 19, 16 people received admits or waitlist decisions. I think there was 13 people who received admits, 3 people who received waitlist. So we've had a pretty significant success rate with ISB. Apart from that, our candidates have also gone on to receive admits from some of the best business schools around the world, including M7 schools like Wharton, Kellogg, Booth, Columbia, MIT Sloan, including the top European schools uh, such as INSEAD, LBS, Cambridge, Oxford, HEC Paris, all of these, including top Asian schools like NUS, HKUST, and obviously ISB. So these are the top schools that we usually focus on. Uh, and we bring all this learning into the ISB application because this year, ISB applications have changed massively, right? Until last year, the applications were very straightforward. They asked you one question about why should they take you, what kind of value addition will you bring to ISB classroom. The second question used to be about how would you take away from ISB? What are the things that you are looking to take away from ISB? And this year, that has completely changed. Now, my perspective on why that has changed is essentially because ISB application became very simplified in a way. It kind of got templatized. It was very easy to sort of build out templates and sort of simply answer those questions, which would make it much more difficult for ISB to weed out people who actually wanted an MBA and people who were just doing it for the sake of it, right? Uh, Now, the current essay questions that you have, the current uh, situation that you have with ISB, the biggest difference is you have two essay questions which are super personal in nature. And this allows ISB to really identify who is coming into their program with a very clear perspective on who they are as a person, what do they bring to the program, what kind of experiences have really shaped their perspective. And this kind of information is only possible to share if you are somebody who has been able to introspect into who you are as a person. So this makes it very interesting. At the same time, it's a very challenging thing to do when you are applying for a B school, looking inwards and trying to figure out what exactly do you want. Telling your personal stories, telling your vulnerabilities, these are not easy things to do for candidates. And that is why I believe this year the applications are going to be extremely interesting. Because if you want to succeed at ISB this year, you will need to present yourself as a super mature candidate. You will need to present yourself as somebody who's able to think through the different life decisions that you have taken or the things that you have done, why you have done those things, and really present a very mature, strong candidature. Now, enough about that. Uh, Again, I welcome you all to the session. I really hope you will enjoy this session and you will learn from it as much as possible. I would really recommend you to utilize the chat box, right? If you have subscribed to our channel, you should be able to sort of add questions that you would want us to answer during this entire session. So feel free to utilize the chat box, ask us questions. When you ask questions, please make them as generic as possible so that you know the answers apply to more people rather than just you personally. Please do not ask me questions regarding your chances because very honestly, the only way to figure out your chances is to apply to ISB and let them give you a decision, right? But again, I thank you very much for joining us. We have almost 90 to 100 people watching right now. So it's great to see. Uh, and what I'm going to do with the session as we move forward is I'm going to open up ISB application. I'm going to walk you through each of those sections. And then if you have any questions, if you have any doubts, please feel free to ask those questions and doubts because then I'll be able to clarify those questions for you. And at the same time, uh, potentially it helps a lot of you get clarity about what ISB is looking for and how to go about the applications for the 2024 intake. Thank you again, and let me very quickly share my screen. So I have this application open for ISB. Uh, I believe you are seeing my screen as well. So within the ISB application, you find multiple different sections first, right? When you build out your application for ISB, you'll find multiple different sections available. Within these sections, you are supposed to put in your applicant information, which includes a lot of personal information, a lot of information about your family, about your education, your work experience, your extracurricular activities. Then obviously you will have certain essays to write, the recommendation that you need to take for ISB. And then finally, if you want to apply for scholarships, those, and finally you submit the application, right? Now within this, I believe this is not it's pretty simple to understand. When you start with this, my first suggestion is just fill out all the basic details, your application details, your personal details, what is your name, where do you live, you fill out all that, you fill out your family details, you fill out your GMAT scores, GRE scores, you fill out your academic qualification. Again, within the academic qualification, ISB allows you to talk about your class 10th, class 12th, your bachelor's, if you have had an integrated program, any professional education you've had. So it allows you to talk about all those things and basically fill these out. Now, while we are in this part of the section, if you have any questions regarding any aspect with respect to the academic aspects for ISB, please feel free to share questions and we can always dive deeper into those, right? A very quick advice here, a lot of people ask us regarding taking IELTS or TOEFL for ISB. If you have graduated from a school or a college, essentially, where the medium of instruction was in English, then you do not need to take TOEFL or IELTS for ISB, right? So that is something that you can keep in mind. If you have any questions regarding academics, feel free to share that. We'll come to I see a few questions on, experience-based or scholarships. We'll come to those later during the video. We'll go step by step from academic, then into employment details, then to extracurricular activities, and then to the essays, and then answering questions about everything else. Is there a section for certifications? Usually not. If it's something that you've done professionally, if it's like a CA, for example, that you have done, then you have this professional education wala section where you can actually go in and you can put in your degree, right? So let's say if you have, I believe this is where you have it. So you put in full-time, part-time, you put in your bachelor's degree, or you put in your certification, CA, CFA, CPA, whatever it is, and then you sort of fill out those details, right? So this is something that ISB allows you to do, right? Regarding GMAT or GRE, thanks for asking that question, Jatin. This is something which is very important to understand, and we get this question from a lot of candidates. What should you take? Whether should you take GMAT or should you take GRE? right? Now, when it comes to ISB does not really care. ISB cares, all it cares about is that they have certain scores, which are the average scores for both the tests, whether for GMAT, for GRE. If you're, if you want to have a strong candidature, then all ISB cares about is that you have a score which aligns with that average, right? The farther you are from the average on the lower side, the lower your chances are going to be. The higher you are in the average than the average, the higher your chances are going to be, right? It does not mean that this is the only criteria for admissions. If, let's say, if you have a 760 GMAT, does not mean that you'll get an admit to ISB, but it certainly improves your chance, right? Now, with respect to GMAT, the average GMAT score for ISB hovers around 710. So if you have any score, let's say 710 or above, you're absolutely fine in general. But if you, even if you are a little bit on the lower side, it should not hamper your application too much. For GRE, the average GRE score for ISB hovers around 328. So if you are taking GRE, try to score around 328. If you're taking GMAT, try to score around 710. I hope that answers the question. Rahul has a question. If I've undertaken any fellowships, I'm not really sure what you mean by fellowships, Rahul. So if you could clarify that a bit, try to see if those things would fit with any of these sections here. If, let's say, additional education, they might, it might fit. So try to see if that fits here. If it doesn't fit, I would suggest you to reach out to ISB admissions team, and they might be able to sort of present or clarify that to you in a much better way, right? Regarding the documentations that need to be uploaded, I'm very sorry, but I think you can go through the list. You will see all the documents that need to be uploaded here. So you'll be able to find that very, very clearly. Anisha has a question. Is there a sectional cutoff that we need to meet? Do they look at your overall GMAT score or even sectional scores? That's a very, very nice question. Thank you for asking that, Anisha. Now, when it comes to GMAT or GRE, in both these tests, right, usually there's never a sectional cutoff, right? So it does not matter much whether you have great sectional scores. ISB or any other B school in the world, they do not have sectional cutoffs, right? But you have to keep in mind that MBA programs are usually very analytical and quantitative in nature, right? And that means that schools want people who have a certain degree of quant ability, right? So if your quant scores, essentially with both the tests, the quant scores have slightly bit higher preference. It gives them a very clear idea if you are somebody who has the capability to handle the quant section or the quantitative rigor of the academic program, right? At the end of the day, the MBA is an academic program. So they want to ensure that you are not going to be a candidate who will come here, not understand anything quantitative and go back very, very dissatisfied. So as far as the sectional part is concerned, in general, a standard thing that you can expect is that quant is something which will have a higher preference. For example, especially in case if you come from backgrounds which are very unquantitative. For example, if you are a lawyer and you have a low quant score as well in your test, that is not a great sign for ISB, right? But if, let's say, if you are a lawyer or somebody who has never studied quantitative subjects, right? Lawyer, or you have studied marketing, or you have done something else, right? But you have not done a lot of quantitative subjects, then a good practice would always be to have a high quant score, whether it's GMAT, whether it's GRE. So I hope that clarifies a little bit. I have another question from Pratik. Could you give me an idea about the average GMAT for Indian IT male? There is no such specifics available. But again, the way to look at it is essentially if you come from an overrepresented background, IT is a very overrepresented background, right? So it becomes much more important for you as a candidate to be above the average scores for if you come from such backgrounds. So For Indian IT males, I would simply suggest make sure that you're applying with a score which is above 710. Even 710 works. Even 700 should work depending on how the rest of your academic profile looks like, right? So it could work out pretty well, but definitely do not go very low in GMAT. For example, if you have a 650 GMAT or a 320 in GRE, that does not really look very well for you because you're coming from a background where there will be so many other candidates who will have better scores than you, so your chances will drop down, right? um Regarding how to submit the scores, essentially when you take the scores, usually you'll be able to take a screenshot. If not, the schools will the test taker will provide you an unofficial copy. If they don't, then make sure that you have sufficient time to get the score. That is very important. Uh, and still, if you don't get that, let's say if you're not able to get the score, make sure that you've sent the score to the school. That's very important. But get in touch with ISB and they will be able to sort of give you a better guidance on how to exactly achieve that, right? Uh, I have another question. How much do the 10th and 12th academic scores via admit decision? Now, this is where a lot of people will tell you that 10th and 12th are probably very important and they provide a lot of perspective to the B schools. Personally, I do not believe that. So I am of the opinion that 10th and 12th usually do not matter anymore. We have had candidates who had terrible marks in 10th and 12th, and they still made it to ISB, right? Uh, the bachelor's grades are very, very important. Your GMAT scores are very, very important. 10th and 12th, they'll take that information, but I don't believe they will have more than 2% or 3% in terms of total weightage, right? I don't see any other questions specifically regarding the academics. Professional certifications. So do professional certifications add value, right? Professional certifications, first of all, it will be very difficult for you to mention those. I don't believe you'll be able to mention most of those professional certifications if you have done something like product specific or technology specific, because ISB does not allow you to, they don't give you that space to add those details. So that automatically sort of kind of answers your question that it will not have a lot of effect, right? But if let's say if you have done multiple certifications to help yourself during your career, right? You can always make it part of your story to highlight how you've been able to build a better career for yourself by learning continuously. So that is something that you could do, but the certifications by themselves will not have a lot of effect on your application. Let me just very quickly see if there are any other questions. Right. Right. So I see questions which are moving towards the new test formats, right? So GRE pattern and GMAT patterns, they are changing. What test should you take? See, my perspective here is slightly different. My perspective is very straightforward. It does not matter whether the tests are changing or what is happening with the test. What matters is what you want to do. If you are looking to apply in round one for ISB, then you need to take the tests which are available to you. Right now, you have the normal GMAT and the normal GRE available. Take those tests, get your scores, apply to ISB. You will the only reason why you should start focusing on the shorter version of the GRE or the shorter version of the GMAT is if you don't know when you are going to apply, right? So as long as you are looking to apply this year in round one, then it does not matter what is going to happen in terms of changes. What matters is do you have your test scores before you end up applying, right? So I hope that answers the question. I don't see any other. Right. So I see a question regarding CFA, and this I think is a very, very interesting question. If you have just a level 2 pass and you don't have the charter, how do you mention that? Well, you don't mention that because think of it this way. The easiest way to understand is this. If you have a bachelor's degree, you get that degree only if you sort of complete the bachelor's, right? Complete all 4 years of your engineering or 3 years of your BCom. And that is when you become, somebody who's a graduate from a bachelor's degree. That is when the degree has value, right? If you've done CFA, having level 1, level 2 does not really add much value from a school's perspective, because that's just the middle steps that you've done. They will add a lot of value if you have the complete charter. So there's no point in mentioning that you've cleared level 1, that you've cleared level 2. They don't really add a lot of value from a B school's perspective in terms of your capabilities as a candidate, right? So I hope that clarifies. Right. So I think I don't see any other questions on the academic part. If there are any questions specifically on GMAT versus GRE or anything regarding GMAT or GRE, please feel free to sort of share those questions, and we might be able to take them later on. I do see one question, sorry. I do see a very interesting question, how to offset lower graduation GPA. Thank you for asking that question. That's a very, very useful question, very important as well. So the one thing that you need to understand when we talk about the academic aspects, right? There are 4 things that make up for your academics, right? One is your GMAT or GRE scores. The second one is your bachelor's degree, right? Your master's degree or whatever degrees that you've done. Now, if this part is low, if you're saying that your graduation marks or undergrad or whatever marks are low, the only other area which corresponds to your academic prowess is your test scores. So if you have a low GPA, then it becomes very, very important for you to have a great GMAT score or a GRE score, right? That is the only way you will be able to actually offset your low GPA. There is no other way to offset your low GPA. Your extracurriculars will not offset your low GPA. Your extracurriculars will allow you to present yourself as a diversity candidate. They will allow you to tell the ad forms that you are somebody who is engaged in multiple different things, but it does not offset your academic capability, right? So the only way to sort of offset your lower graduation marks is through a great GMAT score or GRE score. The only way to offset a low GMAT or GRE score is to ensure that you've had great academic potential previously. That is the only way to sort of adjust or adapt into the academic part of it. Now let's move to the second part of it, that is the employment details. I see a lot of questions here as well. Now, the first thing when it comes to ISB and the employment side of it and the kind of work experience that they look for, if you're applying for PGP, keep in mind, the statistics from ISB. The average profile at ISB has around 4.5 years of experience. Now, when it comes to 4.5 years of experience, essentially, the range usually at ISBs is from 3.5 to around 5.5, 6.5 years of experience. That is the 80% range, right? Of which there is a lot of people who join through the YLP program with around 2 years of experience. So if you are on the lower side of experiences, your chances are going to be a bit lower because there's only 20% of people who come between 2 to 3 years of experience and more than 6 years of experience. So your chances of getting into ISB naturally are lower because you are out of that majority 80%, right? This is something that you just have to know. This should not affect your decision to apply to ISB. It should simply tell you that, your chances of getting in will be affected by this factor. It does not determine whether you will actually get in or not. You will only get that answer once you end up applying to ISB. Now, coming to the second part of it, if you have this amount of experience, when you start sharing those experience details with ISB, the very, very important thing is to showcase the professional skill sets that you have developed and also to showcase the leadership qualities that you've developed through the experiences that you've had. Now, the biggest question that we usually get from people is, I've only had 4 years of experience. I am not in a position where I'm leading a team, right? So how do you showcase your leadership potential? How do you showcase that you are somebody who's leading because you're not managing a team? The first thing that you need to realize here is that all these schools in the world, they know that this is where you're coming from. They have average 5 years, 4 years of experience in general. So they know that the candidates might not have a lot of leadership experience. They don't expect you to be in a position where you're managing multiple people. If you've had that option, that's great. That adds to your experiences. But if you have not had that, it does not mean that your chances are on the lower side or that you don't have leadership capabilities. Leadership qualities or leadership skills that you need to showcase can also come from the normal professional life that you've had. If you have taken initiatives within your workplace, if you have ensured the way you work with people, the way you interact with people, the way your perspectives have evolved and how you have shared things, if you have taken initiatives, if you have sort of gone ahead and gone out of your way to do certain things at your work, all those things showcase your leadership potential, right? So talk about those things. Talk about aspects which showcase the impact that you have created in your work. Talk about aspects which yourself help you present yourself from the perspective of how you have been able to affect business through the work that you have done. And this is something which is incredibly difficult to do, especially with ISB, because ISB gives you very, very small amount of space to actually talk about the work that you have done. Now, within this section, you will be able to add all the different experiences that you've had. What we suggest people to do, one of the best practices here, is make sure that you talk about all the different positions that you've held so far, right? What that means is, if let's say you've worked in one company and you've had 2 promotions in the last 5 years, make sure you add them separately. So the first position goes as a separate entry, your second position goes as a separate entry, and the final position, the current position that you have, that goes as a separate entry. That will automatically do 2 things for you. One, it will help you showcase a very clear progression that you have received promotions at your work. That is a very, very good indicator that you are somebody who is valued at work, right? Second, it will help you get more space to talk about, right? So just to sort of show you this particular aspect, when you go into the employment section, you will be able to detail multiple things about what you have done, right? So for example, let's say you put in full-time employed, you put in your company name, you put in the industry, what does the employer do, all these things. Then with respect to your personal responsibilities at the job, ISB gives you 10 bullet points of 100 characters each. So you will have 5 bullet points to highlight the different responsibilities that you've had, right? And each bullet point is maximum of 100 characters. Then you will have 5 bullet points to highlight the initiatives and achievements that you have taken, right? Or that you have sort of built during your work. And these are the 5 details that you have to put in. So a maximum of 1,000 characters that you can leverage to sort of apply to ISB and tell about what you have done. So it makes it very, very imperative for you to utilize this space very, very effectively and smartly. The best way to do it is to utilize the STAR framework. Now, the STAR framework, if you have not heard of it, stands for situation, task, actions, and result. This is what the STAR framework stands for. The way we suggest candidates to talk about it is essentially within the responsibility section, highlight the different situations and the tasks that you had, and within the initiatives and achievements, highlight the different actions that you took and the results that you achieved. That will ensure that you are able to talk about multiple things in your profile while making sure that you are presenting them in the best possible way. Now, how to leverage this? The first thing to do when you are writing any bullet for any B school, when you're building out the resume, is to use action verbs. Action verbs are essentially words like, you led a team, you collaborated, you worked, you initiated stuff, you built, you engaged with something. Essentially, the past tense of verbs which showcases that you were doing something, right? Merge these two. So when you talk about the situation and the task, make sure that you highlight what were you doing, what was the role that you had, and what was the task that you needed to perform. When you talk about the situation, that becomes your role and the context of why you were doing it. The task is essentially what were you doing. So essentially, overall, what you're talking about within the responsibility section is what were you doing and why, right? Now, to give you a very quick example, let's say you are an analyst who works on optimizing a lot of reports, and you work with multiple different analysts from 5 different departments to do that for multiple clients, right? A very good way to present that would be collaborated with 3 analysts from 2 departments to optimize report generation process for Fortune 500 client. This essentially tells you very, very clearly what was your role. You were somebody who was collaborating with multiple analysts. It tells the position or the situation that you were in. You were working with people from multiple departments. That automatically tells ISB or anybody who's reading your application that you are somebody who's able to collaborate and work with different people, right? And then what were you doing this work for? And that was to optimize the report generation process. Now that sounds pretty good, but I don't know the kind of scale that you were working on. Were you doing that just for a normal one report for a very, very short kind of thing? Or were you doing it for somebody who's very big? The moment you put in the details of your client, that it was a Fortune 500 client, it automatically says that this was the impact of your work. So it very clearly identifies to me the scale at which you were working, right? So make sure you highlight what were you doing and why were you doing that. Use action verbs. Use Make sure that you detail the task at hand. That was to optimize report generation process or whatever you have done. And then bring out the actions and the results in the later part. So your task was to do this. What did you do, or how did you sort of achieve that? So maybe you, you know, automated the process. So automated report gen process across 3 BUs, reduced uh, time taken by 90%. That would be a great action and result to talk about, right? So essentially, you highlight very, very clearly what you have done, why you have done it, and present very specific quantitative evidence to talk about it. And that will allow you to really bring out your perspectives or the impact from your work very, very clearly to the B schools. Now, let me just go back. So I hope that has clarified the employment part. I see a lot of questions around the employment section. So let's talk about that. I see. Okay. Now, one question that I see from Naman is, do ISB interviewers ask pointed questions related to CV, right? Yes, absolutely, they will. So if you write that you have reduced a time, so the example that I gave, that I reduced the report generation time by 90%, it is absolutely possible that your interviewers will ask you to defend and elaborate on how exactly did you receive that 90%, right? If you say that you reduced costs by 10% or 20%, they be prepared to defend that, be prepared to go into the details of what was the cost before, what are the actions that you took, which action contributed to how much savings. If you are mentioning numbers, make sure that you are able to back them up. If you're not able to back them up, you will put yourself into a very, very difficult corner where it will become very, very difficult for you to come back from. ISB interviews are going to be very focused on what you have done in terms of your work experience. Now, let's see other questions. What should be the ideal work ex for applying to ISB? Okay, thank you for asking that. Again, as I said, if you are anywhere between 3.5 to 6 years of experience, that's the perfect time to apply to ISB. But it does not mean that if you are anywhere if you're out of this range, that you should not apply to ISB. Uh, this is something that you don't control anymore, right? This is completely out of your control. If you have just 1 year of experience, you can still apply to ISB and you can apply through the early entry option, which will give you a deferred admit to ISB. You have the exact same application. You don't have a separate application for early entry. So you will have the exact same application that you can use. If you have too much experience, let's say if you have very high experience, like 8 years of experience or 10 years of experience, again, there is nothing that you can do to reduce that. So if you want to apply to ISB, if you believe that this is a program which will help you grow in your career, absolutely go ahead and apply, because there is nothing you can do to sort of come back into that ideal range for ISB, right? Only if you apply to ISB will you be able to get into ISB, leverage all the benefits that it's going to give you. So I hope that clarifies the question. Let's see if there are other questions. I see a lot of questions regarding round 1 and round 2. Where are your chances better if you apply, whether in round 1 or round 2? Just to clarify that question, there is absolutely no difference in terms of your admit chances. If you are trying to rush your application just because ISB gives 100% scholarships in round 1, please do not, right? Because ISB does not give out 100% scholarships to everyone. So if you submit a subpar application, if you submit an application which is uh, very likely to be rejected just because it's rushed and you wanted to sort of do it in round 1, that is not going to help you even get an admit. Forget the 100% scholarship. At the same time, the people who receive the 100% scholarship, out of the batch of 700 or 700 people that they admit through uh, PGP, 6 to 700, there will be probably 2 to 5 people who will end up receiving that 100% scholarship. If you expand that, maybe 10 people, right? So don't be so fixated on that 100% scholarship that you screw up your applications, very honestly, right? I have another question from Ravleen. Can you apply twice in consecutive years? Absolutely, yes. You can only apply once every year, right? So you can absolutely apply this year and then next year. If, let's see, is there any quota split between different career backgrounds, marketing versus IT versus finance? Thank you for asking that, Tanika. Uh, the first thing is, even if there was, you will never know about it, right? We will never get to know if there is a quota split within, internally within ISB. Now, what you have to keep in mind, ISB or any other B school in the world, they are very, very cautious about who they are admitting because they want to maintain a certain level of diversity within the classroom, right? So there will definitely be some sort of, uh, you know, breakdown internally for ISB in terms of which kind of people do they want and how many. But those numbers, the details, you will never be able to find out, as well as there is no point in worrying about it because uh, that should not be affecting your application. Whether you come from a marketing background does not make it easier for you to get into ISB. If you come from an overrepresented background, yes, it is a bit more difficult because you simply have more competition, but does not make any other difference does not create any other difference to your profile. Does not mean that you will never be able to get into ISB, right? So let's see if there is other questions. I see questions around gap year, right? So is gap year a problem for shortlisting? Thank you for asking that, Deba Pradeep. Uh, Gap years are not problems per se, as long as you are able to very clearly explain why did you have the gap, what did you, what were you doing during that period of time. We have worked with multiple candidates who had huge gaps, and they also made it to ISB. So it's not a problem as such, but you need to have very clear explanation of why did you take that gap. And if you are able to do that, you should be absolutely fine. Um, I'm ISP asks for 24 months of experience. I have total 25 months while applying. Right. So just to clarify, in terms of your work experience is counted at the time of joining the program, not at the time of your application. Because if let's say, so if you have 2 years of experience right now, we are in July, your experience will not be counted as 2 years at this point of time. Your experience will be counted as 2 years and 9 months at the time of joining ISP, right? So that is how it will be calculated. Then we have, is it absolutely necessary to quantify each and every pointer in the work column? No, it is not. But think of the quantification as a friend to you, right? The quantification will allow you to showcase the impact that you have created. So the more you quantify or the better you are able to sort of present yourself, the better it is going to be for you. Think of it this way. Let's say if I tell you that I have worked with a lot of candidates, I help candidates getting into ISB, right? That is one statement if I make. Versus if I tell you that I've worked with, as I said, I worked with 23 candidates, out of which 84% of them received an interview call from ISB. Which one of these two statements creates a better impact on you? I'm assuming it will be the one with the quantification, right? Because it allows you to see the level of work that we have done, the scale of work that we did. I could also say I've done 100% quantification. Yeah, I've, 100% of our candidates got an admit from ISB, but it turns out that I only worked with one person, right? So what is more impressive? Getting one person and having 100% admit rate, or working with 23 people, getting 19 people to get interviews? That is how quantification can help you out, right? So when you quantify things, it puts things in perspective for the person who's reading your application. And that's how it can really benefit them. So I hope that clarifies a bit. Right. I think let's move to, okay, I see another question. If I have a promotion or change just 2 months before R1, whenever you have the change, it will always be considered career growth, right? Because that adds to your career. So there's literally nothing negative about it, or it will not be ignored, right? We have a question. I've taken a break from my job to concentrate on GMAT. Will that reflect badly on my application? Unfortunately, personally, I believe yes, it will, because what you have to keep in mind is the people who are applying to ISB, the 900 people who will be working with you, will be studying with you at ISB. Almost all of them are exactly in the same boat as you are. They are also working. They are also preparing for their GMAT. They are also applying to ISB, and they are doing that without taking a break. So if those people have the capability to do that without taking a break, they are able to manage their time and everything for that, and you are not able to do that, that does not send a great signal to ISB. So unless and until you have a very, very strong reason for taking a career gap, we usually do not advise candidates to take career breaks just to prepare for GMAT because, uh, yeah, it does not reflect very, very nicely on you. Uh, the clarification question that you have, Ravleen, regarding one application, it's one academic year. So within this, for the 2024 intake, you will only be able to apply once. Then you will be able to apply for 2025 or 2026, but you won't be able to apply, let's say, this year in September and next year in January, right? So I think we have done this quite a lot. We'll come back to this if we have more time, but let's move on to the other sections. Let's move on to awards and activities. This is something which is very, very straightforward. You put in the areas of award that you've received. You provide the detail of the award. If possible, highlight why did you receive this award. You have certain character limits here as well. So make sure you talk about those. Then you go into the extracurricular activities. Make sure you highlight what you did. So very similar to how we presented or how we worked in the work experience section. Uh, Try and ensure that when you talk about the activities, you're also presenting the action plus results of what you did. What exactly were you working on, right? Present the actions and the results that you had from your extracurricular activities. And here within the designation held, you can always mention the role that you held, right? So just as an example, if you want to have, I could have something like I organized 5+ communication workshops for 200+ college students. Okay. You put in the details month here, and then I was working as a member of the literary club at IIT right? So this was something that I did. So essentially, what you did along with results of that, right? Why were you doing that? That's very important. Whenever you put in context of why were you doing something, that always creates a better impact on the person who's reading your application, right? And that is what you want. You want to create an impact on the person who's doing that. Because if you create enough impact, you'll be able to get into ISC, right? So I think that's quite understandable. Let's come to one of the most important parts of the applications now, the essays, right? Um, this year, the application essays for ISB are completely different. It's not the standard run-of-the-mill essays that they had. In fact, the first essay and the second essay, both of them almost pains me to say this to an extent, but it's the truth. They have been picked up directly from the INSEAD application, which is also a very, very nice thing for me to see because both these questions, the first question is about emphasizing your strengths and weaknesses, an honest portrayal of yourself. This is something which is very difficult to answer unless you've been able to introspect. When you talk about your strengths and weaknesses, make sure that you have looked back at your life, the things that you have done, the things or experiences that have really shaped you as a person, and then sort of answer this question. It's very, very important to be very authentic in this answer. When I say authentic, I mean you need to come off as someone who's not answering this question superficially. It has to be an in-depth answer which allows the reader to really feel what were you going through and how did that affect you, right? Apart from that, you have to keep in mind when you talk about strengths, whatever qualities you mention, if you're presenting them as strengths that you bring, then those strengths need to have helped you somehow. So if you say, for example, that I am a very curious person, the first thing that you need to do is highlight how did you become that curious person? What are the different experiences that you've had in your life which made you a curious person, right? The second step would be how has this curiosity helped you in life? So if I have to answer for myself, I would say I'm somebody who is a very adaptable person. And that adaptability came because I have lived across multiple cities throughout my life. So for the first 20 years of my life, for the first, yeah, 20 years of my life, spent, I did not spend more than 5 years in any one city. So I lived across 4 cities in the first 20 years. The next 10 years of my life, I lived across, I never lived more than 2 years in a particular country. So I lived across almost 4 different countries in those 10 years. So this constant moving around, constantly talking to people, talking to new people, making friendships, building relationships, adjusting to the new environments, adjusting to local cuisines, local cultures, understanding those things. That is something that has really made me a very adaptable person. But this is not enough. You will have to talk about it. How has this adaptability helped me? Now, this adaptability has helped me become very open minded. It has allowed me to accept perceptions or perspectives of different people, different cultures who come from various backgrounds, and simply allowed me to be much more accepting of differences with others. This has allowed me to work with multiple candidates from different backgrounds, from different social profiles, work profiles, academic profiles, cultural differences, and still work with all of them, understand their stories, and then help them portray themselves as their best selves during MBA applications. So when you talk about a strength, you pick up your quality, you go into the details of how have you exactly built it up, and then you very clearly identify how it has helped you. If you don't talk about how it has helped you, then you will not be able to justify it as a strength. The similar thing goes for the weakness. You pick up whatever weakness that you want to talk about, but then you highlight why are you like that? What drives that negativity or that weak aspect of your candidature? And then sort of very clearly identify through examples of where it has affected you negatively, right? For example, if I have to again talk about myself, I'll say, I've become very adaptable. At the same time, I'm a very curious person. I love doing new things and I believe in just sort of just doing those things. However, I've also realized that one of my weaknesses is that I get bored very, very quickly. I'm a very curious person. I love exploring new things, but I get bored very, very quickly. So I am not able to focus on long term projects. That is one reason why we have started multiple initiatives at Management Masters, but a lot of them have not extended beyond 3 months because I have not been able to sort of continue them. I got bored of them, right? And that is a great example to talk about, right? Because it gives you a peek into my life. It gives you a peek. Puts you into my mind. It allows you to empathize with me. Okay, okay, I can understand this person now, right? That is what you need to do for yourself. You need to make the admissions committee understand you. You need to make the admission committee empathize with where you are coming from, what have you done so far, and how it has affected your life. That is the essence of the first essay. The second essay that you have is essentially about the successes and failures that you've had. So you pick up one success that you consider, one failure that you consider. When you talk about successes, and it's very, very important to understand, a lot of people make the mistake here that they talk about promotions or passing CA or passing IIT JEE, essentially positional achievements that they've had as successes. If you do that, what you're doing is you're trivializing your effort. Think about what did you do which allowed you to receive that award, which allowed you to receive that promotion, which allowed you to get, you know, pass through CA or clear JEE. That effort that you've put in, that is something that will stay with you. And that is what will allow you to talk about the success that you've had. Think of it in terms of the impact that you have created through it. Great that you received that promotion. Great that you were able to sort of build that, great product which allowed you to sort of receive that promotion. But what was the impact of doing that? So if you work on something, try to think of the impact that you have created and sort of relate that back to your success. And when you talk about your successes and your failures, or whenever you share any examples, use the format which we call as, again, go back to the star format. Talk about the situation, talk about the task, talk about the actions, talk about the results, and then add a bit of learning. What did you really learn from this situation? So you take your examples and you break them down into this structure. You talk about what exactly was bothering you, right? What were the key challenges that we were facing? What was it that we're supposed to solve? Then you talk about the action that you took to solve those challenges, the actions that you took to address those challenges. And then you talk about the results. Finally, once you've explained the entire situation, the entire example, then talk about the learning that you got from it. What did this situation help you learn? How did this success affect you as a person? And ISB has very, very clearly sort of identified what kind of learnings that you need to talk about. And they say that, delve into the personal and interpersonal lessons that you've learned from this. So how did this particular situation that you're talking about affect your perspectives about working with people, right? That is what you need to talk about. In terms of the overall importance, when you set up the context, when you highlight the situation and the task, this is an extremely important part of this. Without having the right context, you will not be able to present yourself in a better way. But the most important part of this aspect, or when you share examples, is the actions that you took. The result that you received does not have any bearing on your answer. This will sound very counterintuitive, but results do not matter. It does not matter how big was your success. It does not matter whether you were able to close a $2 billion deal. That is not going to get you into ISB or any top B school. What is going to get you into that is, even if it was a $10,000 deal, how did you approach it? What was your perspective while doing that? How did, what are the challenges that you faced? Why do you consider that as a successful project for yourself? If you're able to sort of bring that out through the actions and the situations and the tasks, and then sort of reflecting back on all that and presenting your learnings, this will be something which will help you tremendously with your applications. I hope this is clear. Let's very quickly sort of go back to the third essay. The third essay is essentially the quintessential MBA essay, which essentially talks about why do you want to apply to PGP, right? How will the PGP help you achieve your goals? Now, because ISB has made it optional and they have very clearly given a note that it is not necessary for you to write this essay, personally, I believe that this essay does not carry any marks anymore, right? So whether you write this essay, whether you don't write this essay, my personal opinion is that it does not matter for ISB anymore. What this will impact is the interviews. So the interviews are definitely going to focus on this particular aspect tremendously and expect a lot of grilling on your goals when you go into the interviews. But as far as the application is concerned, I do not believe this essay will have any bearing on your application. But to give you a structure for this, a very, very straightforward perspective here would be talk about your short-term goal, uh, highlight why is this your short-term goal, and then very specifically highlight how ISB will help you. Now, when I say very specifically how ISB will help you, what I mean is, instead of saying something very generic like ISB will help me, the courses at ISB will help me build my business fundamentals, make sure that you know which courses you are talking about. When you say, the diversity of the peer group at ISB will allow you to interact with multiple people and sort of broaden your horizons, make sure you know how are you going to interact with your peers. What are the resources and opportunities that ISB provides, which will allow you to interact with your peers? Where will you do that? You're not going to reach ISB and start talking to everybody that you see. So what kind of opportunities and resources does ISB provide you, where you will be able to leverage those, and how will you gain from it? So be very, very specific about those. Be very clear about those, because if you don't have a clear answer, uh, or if you end up presenting a very generic answer to ISB, then this essay probably will do you more harm than good, right? I hope these questions have been useful, the discussion. Let's go back into the Q&A, see if there is something that we can further answer. So first, I don't see any questions on the essays. Does business background have an advantage or a disadvantage? There is no such thing. It depends on what you want out of ISB. So we have worked with business candidates before. They've gotten into ISB with I think we have an interview which we have shared as well. So we had somebody who worked with us who came from a family business background. He ended up getting into ISB with a 12 lakh scholarship. So it definitely had a lot of advantage, probably, right? Um, um, I don't see a lot of questions on the essays. Could you give me an example of a weakness that may not go down well with the adcom? All right. See, thank you for asking that, Yamini. A weakness that may not go down well with the adcom. Essentially, those would be weaknesses which directly get in conflict with the value systems of ISB, right? So if, let's say, ISB, you do your research, you figure out these are the things that ISB really likes. They want people to have certain qualities. ISB is a place which focuses, for example, very heavily on teamwork, right? And if you say that, you are somebody who does not know how to work in teams, you are somebody who only works on an individual level, you don't care about people, that is going to go down very, very negatively. So try to identify the qualities, the value systems that ISB really looks out for, and then essentially try to avoid saying things which are absolutely in contrast or conflict with those values, right? I hope that helps. Similarly for the failure, right? But failure it's still fine. So if, let's say, you have the same example that you are not able to work in teams, and that is something that you point out as a failure, you can still sort of salvage that by saying, okay, this is what you have understood, and this is something that you would want to improve upon. So that you will be able to salvage, but you cannot say something which conflicts directly with ISB, right? So I hope that clarifies. Um, what if a person, right? So Karthik has a question. What if somebody applied in round 3 last year and is now looking to apply in round 1? How can they shape reapplicants essay? So reapplicant essay we didn't see because this is a new profile that I've created. But the reapplicant essay essentially, what it's a very, very straightforward essay. What you need to showcase is how have you grown as a candidate since that time. And that growth could have happened in multiple different phases. You could have grown academically, you could have grown personally, you could have grown professionally. So identify these 3 areas, highlight what have you done within these multiple areas, and how has that reinforced that your commitment to apply to ISB and get an MBA. And that's it. So it's a very, very straightforward thing to do. Um, and I hope that helps, Karthik. Vishnu asks, so essays can be about personal incidents as well, which might not be really connected to work and studies. Absolutely, yes. Make personal essays, make personal experiences a part of your essays. The amount of strength that your personal experiences will lend to B-school applications is incomparable. Like professional examples don't even come close. If you read the first essay, if you read the question of the first essay, the question itself is provide an honest portrayal of yourself, emphasizing your strengths and weaknesses, highlight the key elements that have shaped your personal journey, right? Absolutely talk about your personal experiences. Uh, and that will always help you sort of create better applications and stronger applications. Uh, when talking about long-term goal, how far in the future do they expect us to have clarity? Should the long-term goal be aspirational or achievable? First of all, ISB is not asking any questions about long-term goals anymore, right? So it's good to have a direction, but it does not matter if you cannot point out exactly what is the long-term goal that you have, right? 15 years down the line, what exactly position will be that you will be in. Nobody knows that. ISB does not expect you to know that. Levine has a question. If I have 2 years of experience and I talk about my experiences during college, would it undermine my work experience? Not really. Uh, a fun fact and a secret to share. I applied to ISB when I had 1.5 years of experience. I talked mostly about my college life. I got an interview call. I completely screwed up my interview and got rejected with a 750 GMAT, right? So I hope that helps you get that perspective. Um, should we take professional help on essays? Usually it is looked down upon. What do you mean by looked down upon? I'm not really sure. You are hearing a professional talk about essays, so I'm not really sure what exactly your question is, Rishabh. So if you could clarify that, that would be great. Um, right. Ankush has a question. Very, very important question, I think, to answer. Will my chances at an admit go down if they have already selected somebody with a similar profile? My question back to you is, how will you know that they have already selected somebody with a similar profile? And how do you know the number of seats that they have available for your profile? And how will you keep track of it? So essentially, if you see the drift of where I'm going, essentially it does not matter. What matters is that you submit a great application, get into ISB. If you don't submit, not happening. Um, how to use the optional essay to explain that my organization does not have hierarchy. Uh, thanks for asking the question, Saurabh. You don't need to explain it, right? So there's no need for you to explain that. ISB does not provide an optional essay, right? So there's no way that you will be able to share this with them. But then again, there is no need to sort of share that. It's absolutely fine. Then we have, does applying to round two give you chances for scholarship? Absolutely. I just talked about a candidate who received 12 lakhs in scholarship. He got that in round two. So I hope that answers your question. Um, is talking about mental health a big no in the essays? Absolutely not. You can talk about mental health, you can talk about anything. We have had candidates who have talked about mental health, we have had candidates who have talked about child sexual abuse, we have had candidates who have talked about not speaking Hindi and learning about Hindi. That was the main essay that they had, right? Uh, We have had candidates who have talked about all different things which have shaped them personally. So if mental health is something that has really affected your life and sort of given you perspectives that you did not have before, absolutely go ahead and talk about it because that is who you are, right? So be completely open to sharing your experiences. The more open you are with sharing your experiences, the stronger your application is going to be, right? Uh, right. I think I'm not going to be able to answer a lot of questions here. There's a lot, but and I think we've already had an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and 10 minutes. So I did not realize that. But this has been, I hope, a good session so far. I'm very quickly going to go down to the recommendations. So please feel free to share your questions if you have any about recommendations. Uh, if let's say if you still have questions that you would really like us to answer, especially if they're personal questions, I'm very sorry. Right. So if you still have questions and you would want to sort of answers to those from a personal or professional perspective, what I would suggest is check out our website, managementmasters.in. We still have a few slots available. We have profile evaluation services which can help you understand how competitive you are for ISB or how can you shape up your story for ISB. At the same time, we also have a few slots available for ISB applications if you would want professional help with your applications. So this is something that we can do. Feel free to reach out to us. But now let's very quickly get into the letters of recommendation. Uh, the recommendation, I think the biggest, yes, Kushan, we will be putting this video on YouTube. Sorry for that. I saw multiple messages. But yes, this video will be available on YouTube. Maybe not immediately, but soon after the session happens, right? Uh, so coming back to the recommendations, uh, the biggest concern or the biggest myth that we see floating around when it comes to recommendations is take it from as high a person as possible, as high in terms of positions, and that will be a better representation of your recommendation. It does not matter who you take your recommendation from. It does not matter uh, what is the title of that person. What matters is that that person has worked in a supervisory role to you. They have worked very, very closely with you, and that they know you as a person. They know how you work. They've given you feedback. They've told you good things. They know you, essentially. That is what matters. If you have a manager who has worked very, very closely with you, put his name. It does not matter whether you know the partner or not, and you can get a recommendation from the partner or not. Because if you go to the partner does not know you in, and they will not be able to write a great recommendation. What matters is that you are able to present to ISB somebody, a perspective from someone who has worked with you very, very closely, who has seen you perform, who has seen you fail, and who can talk about those things, who can bring out those aspects of your candidature and present a very, very authentic perspective about who you are as a person. And that is what will matter for ISB. That is what makes a great recommendation. So do not worry about, your designation is just analyst. You only have a team leader. You cannot take it from somebody who's a manager or who's a senior vice president or a managing director. It does not matter. If you have any questions about recommendations, right? Okay, before I go there, uh, another thing, what happens within the recommendation? So when you fill out the recommendation information here, you'll be asked to share the name, the company, the details of the recommender. Once you do that, your recommender will receive an email with a link to share the recommendation. Now, within that page, they will have multiple choice questions about your behavior. So they will be able to choose those pointers. They will also have to answer essay questions. So they have multiple options available. There are two major essay questions that they have. One question is about your performance compared to your peers. The other question is about what feedback have they given you and how did you respond to it? When it comes to your performance compared to your peers, for both the answers, very honestly, your recommenders should be answering it as straightforward as possible. This person performed this particular way compared to his peers. So I believe Piyush Ranjan has performed. He is an outstanding person and he is among the top 5% of his peers that I've ever worked with. These are the key qualities that he brings. And then share very, very clear examples to support that. Examples are the key to a successful application. When you write your essays, you have to provide examples. When your recommender writes your letter of recommendation, they have to provide examples. Without examples, your application is worth throwing in the dustbin. If you don't have examples, if you only have platitudes, don't apply. It's better not to apply than to waste your time. So figure out examples from your life, from your professional life, from your personal life. Ask your recommender, provide him those examples. Okay, this is how we work together. This is the suggestion that you gave me. This is the feedback that you gave me. This is what you said was good. This is what you said was bad. And then ask him to write about those things. That is what will make a great recommendation. Now, if you have any questions regarding recommendations, please put them so we can continue with those. If the recommender agrees, can I write the recommendation myself and let him sign off on it? I am very much against that. I do not suggest my candidates to write it themselves. That is not only ethically questionable, but also not something you should do because there's a lot of risk that the writing style that you have will reflect in your recommendations and it will completely mess up your entire application. It's very easy to figure out if the candidate has written the recommendation himself. And I say that because we review almost 100 applications every year. Do keep in mind, I am somebody with experience of just 100 applications a year. ISB folks review 5,000 to 10,000 applications a year. They have a different level of expertise. If you write your recommendations, it will take them 2 minutes to understand that. Do not write your recommendations, please. Simran has a question. My recommender has recently retired. Does that make a difference to its validity? Absolutely not. Feel free to reach out to him. That's a great thing. He has all the time to sort of support your application to ISB, right? So absolutely fine. Vishnu has a question. Can the recommender be a manager from 3 years ago? He can be, yes, but I would personally suggest to find somebody who's more recent, because a recent person will be able to sort of, validate your qualities and perspectives in a better way. If you're absolutely not able to find somebody recent, then as a backup option, yes, you can go back to that manager 3 years ago, but ideally it would be best to have somebody as recent as possible. Kiran has a question. How many recommendations can I submit? It's not up to you. ISB asks for one recommendation, so it's only one recommendation. That's it. So there's no minimum, maximum. Both are one. You have to submit one recommendation, and that's it. Without a recommendation, your application is not considered complete, right? So do keep that in mind. How much time does the recommender have to fill in the application? Right. So thank you for asking that. The deadlines are the same, right? So 10th of September is the deadline for ISB. That means if you want your application to be assessed within round one, your recommender should also submit the recommendation by 10th of September. And that's basically it. What is the kind of writing style do they expect in LOR? There is no such style. They want your recommender to write it. That's it. Also, can we suggest them what needs to be written? Absolutely, yes. You need to do that. So you need to talk to your recommender. You need to tell them what do you want to highlight. What you should not do is write it for him. You think of it like your manager. Your manager tells you what to do, right? They give you the direction of what to do, what you need to do. They don't do it for you, right? If you ask your manager to do it for you, he will not remain your manager for very long, right? Um, right. Now, does the organization of the recommendation recommender matter? I'm not really sure I understand that question. For reapplicants, is it fine if I go the same? That would be a very specific question to answer. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll be able to answer that at this point of time. Um, how do we know if the recommendation has been filled? Uh, I do not recall exactly if that happens, but I think you receive an email from ISB saying that your recommendation has been received, right? So that is one way, right? I think also if you come to your application details, the status here, this should be updated if your recommendation has been, received. So I believe that should happen. Um, right. So if I pick a recent recommender, then you can only talk about 1 year experience. However, my past 5 years experience will not be covered by him. Right. Understood. Why? Okay, let me present it in a slightly different way. It's already 1 hour, 25 minutes in. I am in a slightly funny mood now, right? I'm also hungry. So I hope you'll excuse me on this. Why don't you take it from from your parents? They know you for 25, 26 years, right? Now, the point of me telling this is essentially it does not matter. You understand that, you know, he will only be able to talk about 1 year of your work experience. But that's fine. What he needs to talk about is essentially the kind of person that you are. And that is fine. He is not writing your resume. He is not writing your experience. You have already done that within your application. So recommender is talking about something very specific. Who are you in the professional space from the eyes of of somebody else who is supervisory to you? That is his job. That's it. He is not there to talk about your entire career. So that's essentially what we need to look at. I hope that helps. Um, anything else? I think most of the other questions are pretty, I would say just go back into this video once it's uploaded. And I think you will have your answers as well. I hope this has been a useful session for you. I hope this has been a session where you have found answers to your question. And I really hope you all are able to take these insights from this session and go on to apply to ISB, end up at ISB for free, right? But at the same time, jokes aside, I really love this session. I think this was great. This video will be put on YouTube as well. And I would really, really sort of be glad if you need help, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be glad to help you out. Uh, let's make it to ISB. Thank you, everyone, and have a very